Okay, so investing in humanity is our theme for this year, enabling a new world order, a new global order, that is. And as we heard, we just announced this new prize by FII Institute. And building on that, with the new global order, there's a new work order, especially the post-pandemic era, where the whole world went under a shock to realize there are more things to life than just work, and the flexible work style concept came to play, and remote working became an essential element, especially in the developed markets, where that became much more important than just the value of the paycheck at the end of the month. And a lot of individuals, our employees, are favoring their flexible work style, their life-work balance versus what they get paid for. And that created a great resignation concept in the West, especially in the developed market. Not so much as we move east to the world, but that changed the whole concept and dynamics of the workplace. And how do companies find that balance between the well-being of their employees versus the well-being of the company, the profit, the end of ROI of the company. And today, I will discuss this with my esteemed guests, taking it to looking at from different perspectives, different industries, and different dynamics of the markets. I'll start from my left, Peggy Johnson, CEO of Magic Leap. If you please give us your perspective on this concept, and then we'll go into the discussion.
Sure. So Magic Leap makes a tool that can assist in remote work. It's an augmented reality headset, so you still see your physical world, but we intelligently put digital content into that. And so it actually opens up opportunities to do remote work in new ways that we haven't done. We've been very used to Zoom screens, and so this will really change that experience.
Ken Costa, co-founder and chairman of Albrime Investments.
Thank you very much. I mean, the way I see it is when my grandchild asks my son, what did Grandpa mean when he said he was going to work? What does that mean? And I think that is a very key question as to what in the next generation the whole of work is going to be. And we should be very careful, not simply off the back of a crisis in the COVID crisis, to try and formulate what we think is going to happen to that workplace. But what is very important, and I think to choose, as the FII has done, the investing in humanity as being a key part of the way in which we look at the workplace, because in the trade-off between technology and AI and humanity, there is going to be a struggle. But before we give up to the dominance of technology, I think we need to look carefully at what I call living at work rather than working from home. And where you live and where you work, you could be working at your home, you could be working at your desk, but where it is going to become of critical importance, particularly for the well-being of an entire generation of young people growing up. And I think that issue is going to be dominant more than any other. Or not so much where or what you do, but who you are when you work, being able to tackle the great issues of your own personality, of your working with your colleagues, the difficulty of working with your colleagues, recognizing that in most, particularly in investment banking industry, that the skills are both taught and they are caught. And it's very important to manage both caught and taught, but in a social environment.
Thank you, Ken. Next, we have Beverly Ryder, CCO of Autonomous, a NEOM company.
Hello, thank you. So my perspective is a little bit different because I am a technologist and I work in technology for NEOM, right? Autonomous is a NEOM company, and one of the things that we run into are the constraints of having all the people that we need in the location we need them. So we heavily rely on alliances and partnerships in the ecosystem, and having people being able to work remotely is key to making that a success. Prior to this, I worked in a company where we had 360,000 employees that we were responsible for, and of those, 350,000 worked in the office every day. And to see what's happened through COVID and to see that transition, right, has been really an amazing thing. But what I'll tell you is from that humanity perspective, we've seen it change a nation. right? My other company was headquartered in Japan, and there everybody went to the office all day long, and to change that whole diatribe and how now people live and work and actually can work from home has really changed people's lives. So I can't wait to see where it goes, and I'm hoping at some point on this panel we talk about the metaverse and how that's going to help us.
Thank you, Beverly. Joshua Fink, Managing Partner, Pluma Bio.
Thank you so much, Rakan, and thank you to everyone at the FII Institute for the great work you do in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for hosting us all here. I focus on healthcare, and healthcare is 19% of US GDP, 15% of global GDP, and growing. This is a huge field that impacts everyone in obviously very existential ways. And remote care, paired with what is possible today from a technological standpoint, is transformational. And I would make the argument that unless we embrace this, we are going to have a crisis in medicine. In the West, we have a massive nursing shortage. We're having a retirement wave of doctors. Doctors and practitioners of medicine need to be able to do more work per unit of time and do it with better outcomes for the patients and obviously less unintended consequences. So the embrace of things like remote patient monitoring to continuously monitor patients, what their blood pressure is, what their glucose levels are, what their heart rate is, this is transformational. We think we're sitting here in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has one of the top 10 incidents of diabetes as of any country in the world, and the leading cause of death in the MENA region are cardiovascular diseases. These are things that could be eminently solvable. And you think, for example, let's take diabetes. If we were able to pair insulin and pair that with behavioral medicine, if we were able to see not just how much insulin does a patient take, but what does that patient do in terms of their consumption of food? Is that patient stressed or not? What is that patient eating? Over time, we could work using technology to wean that patient to much lower doses of insulin and to much less insulin. So I actually think remote work is an absolute blessing for healthcare. It's a blessing for human lives. And I think the next 5-10 years, as the technology only continues to be developed, and as health systems and governments embrace this new technology, there'll be so many transformational opportunities in healthcare.
Thank you so much. Let's get deeper into the discussion. So, Peggy, the discussion is building the new work order for the employees all over the world, different societies, different cultures, different dynamics and geographies. Is it one size fits all? How do you see it per sector or even per geography?
Oh, it's absolutely not one size fits all. So I'm in the technology space as well. We have a lot of software engineers who can work literally from anywhere and likely more productive. They're not commuting both ways, and so they have flexibility in their hours. They have a better quality of life. I also have hardware engineers because I make an actual device. And some of that can be done from home. If we put telemetry and things into the device, they can do some remote testing. But oftentimes, those engineers do have to be at work. And so we're just trying to accommodate for both. So it doesn't behoove me to say, everybody come in or everybody stay home, because
so it's more flexible?
Flexibility is here to stay.
Do you think your technology for Magic Leap helps enable that even more so?
It does, because you can now gather teams, and perhaps you're designing a new car. Each of the individuals on that team can be literally anywhere in the world and see the same car in front of them. They can modify the car, they can annotate, they can add data, they can take data away. So it is really opening up new ways to work that we don't even have now. You know, COVID, we've had these
Yes.
Zoom screens, so it's going to be a much more immersive, much more present way of working, even though you are not physically present in the room.
Ken, how do you see that with developed market versus developing market? Would you think the same issue would be in Africa, example?
Well, before coming to that, can I just add one thing to that? You see, we have the classic boomer, as I am, and a generation who are Zoomers. And if you ask my generation, what does close of business mean? We would say 9 to 5 or 6 or wherever. If you ask one of my children, what does close of business mean? It's midnight. And that's a day. And the real issue for us on remote working, as indeed it is going to be in the workplaces, wherever they are, is how we are able to restrain the increasing demands of lifestyles that are not threatening mental health. Because without anyone around, if you continue working away from home, you're going to have to work out how it is that you can maintain the productivity, which we're talking about, and at the same time manage to be a human being in that process. That is the key issue for our time. And you asked the question about Africa. I chair the largest private equity group in Africa. And there, of course, they are space constrained. There always have been. The number of offices have not been able to keep up with the productivity of the people. So in those cases, working from Starbucks or whatever the coffee shop is of choice, or working from a community hall, or it enables that whole new group of people to become so much more productive in the workplace. And I think we do have to then bear in mind that in order to help with that process, we need to think carefully about how we help in education to enable people to have access to Wi-Fi, to
the basic elements
to the basic elements.
Yes. Beverly.
Yes.
So,
oh, go on.
Sorry, come on, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to add on, so I was thinking while you were talking about how do we overcome the humanity and not having humanity when everybody's sitting at home by themselves. And it reminds me back, if everybody remembers, when we were all at home in COVID and we still had teams that we had to take care of. All of us had either parents or kids or people that we cared about that were by themselves. And how we did the extra touches to those people, how we reached out and we asked different questions. And I know for me, and I don't know about you, but for me, in that space where people are by themselves or maybe isolating because work allows them to do that now as well, it's so important to change the work conversation to be more broad than just what you're doing that day and what your objectives are. To ask, how was your weekend? How was that trip you took? To have more of that personal interaction from the leadership all the way down to the bottom, and to create that community within that environment. Because just because you're remote, you shouldn't have to feel alone.
Building on to that, I think after the pandemic, when we all went online, the 9 to 5 became 24/7 in a way. But so then the balance is still not there. NEOM now is promising the world a new everything, really, not just workplace order.
Yes, it is.
How do you guys see that element of the future of mankind, per se?
Well, can I share that we haven't solved it yet? I think I'm living proof that 24/7 is still happening. But I think that so there's two different pieces. There's one, the expectation of the environment, and the other is the personality. You can't take the person out of the environment either, right? So for me, I'm never going to have balance. It's just part of my DNA. I wish I could. I try to teach it to everybody else, even though I don't have it. But what I really believe is that if we set up the construct, right? Like for NEOM, it's the promise of the future. To me, it's the promise for the world. And if we can set up this new humanity and this new social order where that balance is part of your day-to-day life, and you have all this flexibility, and you take care of one another, and you really look at it from the grounds up that we should be the best of the best because we're starting at scratch, then the rest should come easy to us.
I'll turn it to Josh. How is all this helping that individuals, employees, finding their work-life balance, finding their time to find their values and delivering against their values and objectives in life versus delivering on the hours for their work and paycheck? And is that related to industry related as well?
I think it's very applicable. I think about the United States, where I understand the healthcare system the best. Before, you really had to be in geographic centers of excellence. You think about the biotech industry. So much of it historically has been Boston, the Bay Area based, to a lesser extent San Diego. I think COVID has completely shattered this. There's clearly still ecosystem benefits of these places, but now I can't tell you the number of terrific companies that are being started all over the country, companies that are being started in Europe. And I think pre-pandemic, it would have been too difficult for them to get to where they are. They've been able, great scientists, great operators have been able to find commercial partners. They've been able to find venture backers in ways that before the pandemic, they were never able to do. And I look, as a born and bred New Yorker, the emerging ecosystem of companies in the medical space in New York City that's emerging, it's terrific. I see Ben Liu in the audience, who is a founder of TrialSpark. I'm an investor in Ben's company. And just seeing this ecosystem grow up in New York is tremendous. And I think pre-pandemic, it didn't have the level of acceleration it has. So it's I think, a strong force for good.
And just to add on that, I mean, one of the difficulties we have is people talk about a work-life balance, as if there's work on this side and then there's life on this side, and we kind of try and think we can juggle work and life. And the moment you state it as a dichotomy like that, it of course creates the very issue we're trying to avoid, which is why I come back to this question of we need to find a way in which we are going to learn to live, as it were, living while we
They go hand in hand.
or living at your workplace. And that makes a huge difference, because in the clusters, one shoe doesn't fit all. I think we'll see creative clusters or creative communities that are not necessarily the high-rise buildings in which the traditional workplaces were configured, but that will be able to have peer pressure working in favor of the restraint, because there's only one way you can stop that, and that is by some form of encouraged restraint to enable people not to be working 24/7 and then to be burning out.
Do you think, please go ahead.
I mean, I think a great example is actually the work that Peggy's doing at Magic Leap, and the tool it offers through augmented reality, the tool it offers surgeons. And Peggy, I'm sure people would love to hear about this.
Yeah, so even that is going to be a new way of working, because now we can bring the device into the operating room. The surgeons can put it on, still see the patient in front of them, but they can have digital markers on,
As if it's there. Actually.
Exactly,
Yes.
right there on the exact line that they need to put the incision. They can actually call in an expert. If you're a young cardiac surgeon and you see something that you're uncomfortable with, you can actually, in the operating room, call in a cardiac surgeon from anywhere in the world who can see what that surgeon is seeing, walk them through what they need to do next. So it's going to change the dynamics of how we work as well when you have that ability to call in an expert. We also have the ability to take the live beating heart imaged and put it in front of the surgeon, and as they're catheterizing the heart, they can do it more accurately because they see a 3D image of it rather than on a 2D screen. So it's going to change even the very nature of how we work with this ability to augment your physical world.
Interesting. During the summer, I was in Orlando, and there's a center there that teaches surgeons how to do remote surgeries remotely through robotics. And it was very interesting that they were able to do cross-continent surgeries. So that goes to your point earlier that you can do this and actually saves time in terms of sending the physicians from one country to another, or even in developing markets where they don't even have the technology. You might only need certain basic elements that helps them do this on a remote basis. But when you look into the scheme of things, conventional thinking would tell you this would make you lose the corporate culture concept. Would it?
No, I think in some ways, at least with our tool, you feel more present. If you are in this virtual world and there's somebody in the room virtually with you, if they walk behind you, you actually hear through the spatial audio, you hear them walking behind you as if they're physically present. It actually can help, even in a virtual environment, it can help bolster the culture because you feel the physicalness. Because we can track the eye movement, we know if someone's looking at you virtually who's not there. And there's a connection you have when someone looks you in the eye.
Yes, exactly, of course.
So all of those things are now able, through augmented reality, which I think will bolster the culture.
But in terms of your employees, for example, in Magic Leap, how do you have that corporate culture if everybody's remotely not connected in the same physical space at the office?
We use our product.
Interesting, you do.
We do.
Ken, how do you see this corporate culture issue?
I think there's probably a mild disagreement that we would have to have. I think it works very well. For example, brilliantly in the surgeon that you described, or in those that have got the enhanced in reality that they're working on. But in a place where, for example, investment banks or banks, or where you've got a lot of people, the culture has to be set simply by people working together. Now, they may take time in which they're not there, but there will have to be a culture that is not, it cannot be imposed from above, because we all know that the generation is much flatter, looks for much closer involvement in the way in which decisions are made. But it has to be understood that we draw together because we're social animals. We want to meet, we need to meet. And I think at the moment we're struggling with talking about hybrids, about whether that one will survive or another will. What will happen is that we're going to have to take horses for courses. There are certain industries that it'll work very well. And there are others where the culture is threatened by, if it were entirely remote or anybody could do what they wanted to do without being able to come together in some configured way. And I'm not saying that as 9 to 5, 5 days a week, but in some configured way where one would have those social communities which will energize each other and retain the cultures of working together for people working together rather than dissipating.
Beverly, what do you think about this?
Boy, I'm torn. I like both arguments. But I think that it just really depends, right? When I think about my children, they're 18 to 26 years old. There's 3 of them. I have one that could not live without day-to-day social interaction. I mean, she wouldn't survive. She has to go somewhere and go to work. I have 2 that their whole lives have lived in a different way, with the interaction through either gaming and having long-term friendships through that, or through a work environment where they were remote. And most of their peers, all of them, are finding jobs that are remote jobs. And where they're finding their community are through like-minded people like them that get together. And so they still have community in addition to their family, but it's more over common interests and what they want to do for the future or how they want to give back to the world. It's very altruistic in their communities that are created rather than work-driven.
Josh, what do you think about this corporate culture concept, remote versus conventional offices concept?
I actually take the view that more is more, that people need time together in person to work together as a group, to discuss things as a group, to foster Socratic dialogue and discussion. This is essential. But then you also need to embrace technology, and you need to embrace the benefits that come with technology of being able to work from any place at any time, from other voices coming into the conversation and being part of the decision-making process. Many more voices than would be possible if you were simply working in an analog setting. So I think we need to all get back to the office. We all need to work together and create a logical process to come up with good outcomes, but we also need to embrace technology.
So it's kind of a balancing act between both worlds.
And finding how to balance both in kind of the ideal way. And every case, I think, is very idiosyncratic in situations.
So industry by industry is different. So the pace is different depending on the industry. Is it safe to say eventually we're all going to be in that field of that flexible work style? It's just a matter of when, depending on the industry? Anybody can answer that, please?
I think so. I don't think we'll go back. I think most people believe that as well. We won't go back. There's so many benefits. I would have loved the flexibility when I was a young engineer and I was juggling 3 kids to not have those set hours. And now when I see someone at our work benefiting from that, they're going to stay in the industry longer. Frankly, so many women in my generation who are engineers dropped out because of that struggle. Just trying to do this in a fixed time frame is tough. And if we can offer people flexibility, they'll stay longer, be more loyal.
Exactly, but
Yeah.
I like that too.
Yay.
Well,
actually, it's interesting. If you allow me, Ken, a show of hands, who's in favor of remote working versus actual conventional working? Remote working, hands up. Well, half of the room. Interesting. Ken, I'm sorry, you were saying.
We're impaling ourselves on the horns of a false dilemma. I mean, this is
interesting.
This is not. Again, it's like work and life. We can't try and split ourselves up into those two.
There's no line.
Into those lines. It's going to work entirely differently for different organizations. You know, I remember when flexible working was introduced. It shows my age. When flexible working was thought to be something that we offered our employees as a perk. It was something that it was really an advantage, whereas now it's a right. And you can't meddle with that right. What we have to do is to be able to explain that those rights come with duties, and part of those duties are to establish the culture that you want to have, particularly in large organizations. It's different in specialists where there are not that many people working. That we need to establish a culture that is both sides, but one has to be dominant. You can't just say, well, they're equal and we'll just balance them, because the balance doesn't really work. And I think the dominant piece is going to be that which is producing a corporate culture which is based on, the investing in humanity, which is what we're all talking about.
Some say if you find your passion and that's your daily job, you don't have to work every day, right? So then the 6 hours or 10 hours a day is just doing something you enjoy.
That's if you're working on your own. And of course, if you're working on your own, you can work where you like. Entrepreneurs can work where they like, and that's wonderful. And these creative people have come together to do so and to support each other wherever they do. But organizations can't live like that.
Sure.
But
Beverly?
I would counter that we also have work shortages in some industries. And in order to get the best people, and in order to fill out your teams, and in order to be successful, you need to get them from wherever you can get them, and they're not always in the same place.
I mean, just to add on to that, one of the big constraints in bringing new drugs to market is the development cycle. Once you've proven that they work in animals, taking them through the FDA trials, drug development. And one of the biggest constraints is this costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time. And one of the key reasons it does is patient recruitment is hard. It's really hard. And we think about the geography of patients that sign up for human trials. 70% of patients live more than a 2-hour drive away from their trial site. So if we could figure out methodologies and processes to have drug development occur in a remote way, what we're going to do to drug development itself is drive down the cost, make it cheaper, faster, better, and be able to bring more therapeutics, more diagnostics, and more medical devices cheaper to the marketplace and to humanity.
Interesting. The deathbed literature, when you look into what's written into that field, it's always say, if somebody's on the deathbed, they will never say, I wish I worked another hour or another year or made another million. They all say, I wish I spent more time with my loved ones, with my kids, and so on and so forth. And we all know that, yet no one thinks that now. We only think it when probably it's too late sometimes. So that goes into that balance. I'm not saying work-life balance with a clear line or red line between, but it's just having the set of priorities probably. So everybody's saying that post-pandemic, everybody's revisited their personal priorities in life. And based on that, they started to assess their job opportunities, their job, and should they change careers and so on and so forth. What do you think of this?
Years ago, I heard this story that said, your life is a series of glass balls that you're juggling. You have your health, your career, your family, your own well-being, your own physical well-being, and you're juggling as fast as you can. But sometimes you have to set one of them down, and that's okay. So I know, again, when I was raising my kids, sometimes I had a deadline. I was writing some code. It had to get out, and I couldn't get back home early enough on time. And unfortunately, that's the way it was. But at other times, there was a soccer game at the kids' school, and I wanted to be there, and I had to set the work glass ball down. And I've just tried to live that way, and I want to allow my employees to have the freedom to do that as well, that at times you have to set something aside so you can concentrate on some of the others.
I heard the same analogy, except for the ball for work is made out of elastic, where the family ball is glass.
Glass,
so
that's
if you
awesome.
drop the work, it's fine, it will bounce back up.
Exactly.
Ken, what do you think of this?
Well, what I think is that there's going to be two sides of responsibility. Firstly, those that are the employers and the workplace in the defined spaces. Interestingly, this week, the London Times magazine ran a leading article about why we needed more breathing space. Breathing space in the office. And there's been a report published in the UK because we have the largest density of population in office space in the whole of Europe. So it's a marginal change, but the suggestion is that you move from 10 square meters to 12 square meters. So it seems to me giving people more space, creating better environments in which they can flourish in their offices is the one side that the corporate world can add. On the other side, we need to help those that are working remotely, because there always will be that portion of it. We'll discuss how long and how much. How it is that there are limitations on the activity. And because we can, AI and all the other advantages, we can work out who's working too much. And we may have to be quite draconian about how often you can keep your computer on at midnight or 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for a sustained period. Clearly, there are times when you work very hard.
Sure.
But it's not 24/7, 365 days.
Of course.
So that, I think, is on both sides, where with the corporate world, to establish the good culture needs to these boxes that we had, depersonalized places, hot desking, all that we thought was great advantages actually turn out to be a massive disadvantage. So we have empty offices. And now we're going to have to create the environments where people want to come and enable them also against their own interests, perhaps, to be a bit more disciplined when they are in their homes.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah, so I don't think it's if you're in an office or if you're at home. I think it's your corporate culture. I've been sitting here thinking about it. I go back to what you said. If you're laying in bed and you're at the end and you're thinking about what you're proud of, you didn't think about how many hours you worked, right? And so I personally have personal stuff going on right now with my parents, and it makes me think about that a lot. And I think that the corporate culture that supports you and makes you feel safe, whether you're working remote or you're working in the office, and knowing that you can take care of your life and that your family is always going to come first, that's not something that comes or goes based on where your location is. So just from that questions perspective, I really think it's about your leader and about the people that you work with and creating a safe environment for each and every one of us.
Safe environment is an interesting concept, yes.
Yeah.
I think what defines the best companies, what defines so many of the best opportunities, are not the commoditized aspects of those organizations, but are the very best people, the very top human capital, and the ability of those organizations to incentivize these people, to retain these people, and not looking to just get the maximum amount for them over a short period of time, but be on a journey with them and grow with them and have these individuals grow with the organization. So I think that's very, again, idiosyncratic. It's very dependent on the specific organization and task at hand. But if we're trying to solve for retention and incentivization of the very top-tier human capital, I think we have to find this right balance for them. I think we have to find the right balance to keep them motivated, to keep them working really hard, and the economic results will speak for themselves.
Interesting. We're almost running out of time, so I'll get the final words from each one of you. Building on all what we've been said tonight, and the concept, I mean, we've heard, for example, some of the countries in Europe are looking into 4 days a week working versus the normal 5 days a week. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? And people are not allowed to call their employees during the weekend and so on and so forth. Maybe that's a little bit of extreme. But to conclude on this whole topic, what do you think of the new work order, the flexible work style, in the future?
Well, I think it's going to continue to evolve. I don't think it's stopped evolving, but I do think some sort of a hybrid recipe is going to be what we all follow going forward. And I think, as I said, it's going to create more loyalty, happier employees, and I think they'll stay longer.
Dan?
I think we just need to redefine working from home is a description, but what really matters is living well at work, wherever that is.
Interesting. You mean as in spending the hours towards what? Where are you physically and mentally at?
Yes.
And I think it's a blend of everything. It's really about the people, the capital, making sure you're taking care of your people, and that you give them the options that they need to be successful, and it's individual for every industry and every business.
Yeah, I think it's about meeting and exceeding KPIs, and kind of whatever framework works to meet and exceed KPIs, that's the framework that should be embraced.
From a corporate perspective, again, finding that balance where the employees of the organizations are being taken care of, while, of course, maintaining the well-being of the organization itself and its KPIs, as you mentioned. Well, with that, we conclude our session. Thank you all for attending, and thank you all for joining me into this discussion. Thank you.